Yeah. Nattering, chattering. All right, how's everyone this morning? Ready for the weekend?
Yeah.
Asleep, a little bit of time to digest. Yeah. Any questions this morning? Oops.
I'm just wondering, as a practitioner, when someone has a profound change that completely alters their whole body, which is what has happened for me, whether you leave them alone afterwards or whether there's how you make that decision about whether you give them a bit more support to help it integrate or...
Yeah. Well, it depends on what your reference is, isn't it? How you start the lesson. I mean, I oftentimes, in the beginning with people, they don't know that they don't know. So you have to have a way to begin with a reference, and at the end of the lesson, have them enter into that reference movement again, so that they know that there's something is taking place, and they can begin to establish a sense of value in it. Because oftentimes they'll say, "Well, it was so light. I didn't feel like you were doing anything. I couldn't feel anything." Yeah, but then as soon as you begin to help them have a reference and to guide them in the reference, then they begin to go, "Oh." So I think it's how you contextualize the lesson from the beginning. You know, I have clients who but they've one woman was in a training and she's graduated from the training, and I can leave the lesson and I just go and sit in the front part of my room, and she just takes her time and she gets up, and other people need to be guided. It's not something that's, yeah. I mean, when you have a brand new client, oftentimes the question is again for them, and they don't know why they've even come. They've just been recommended or something. Then you have to, I think you have to provide them with even the question, well, when you're sitting, do you have the sense that you're pulled into the ground, or are you lifted? So you invoke their interest. Yeah. I mean, these are the kinds of things I do anyway.
I guess my question is that as a result of what we've done in the last few days, when I woke up last night, yep. Sorry, my pelvis was sitting completely differently, and when I woke up this morning, it was ankle, knee, everything has shifted, and I have this sense of not knowing who I am, which is great because the change is happening. But it just was like, so when you make that big a shift in someone, that their whole being has shifted,
yeah,
do you just let them sit with it? Or is there, yeah.
Well, so then I would have to ask you this question. See, has your being shifted, or is your way of expressing your being shifted? So you say my whole self is shifted. So is that true? Who's aware that you've shifted?
Well, I've been asking myself that question.
Yeah, we all ask that question. We all ask that question. There's a neurological loop through ourselves that observes ourselves in the way that we pay attention. So we observe ourselves observing. Yeah. And if we didn't have that loop, and that loop provides us with a much more internal constant sense of ourself. Because otherwise if my attention is always to how I quote know myself, but somehow there's a way of knowing that I know myself. Now, one of them is more constant than the other. Yeah, these become more difficult questions, don't they? But for when I work with a client, for the most part, clients come because they seek to be out of pain, or they seek some kind of relief, or they're in some kind of difficulty. So this level of question oftentimes doesn't happen for a while. Yeah, it's not something that that's necessarily the beginning tenor of a lesson. But as I move with them, then I am happy to introduce them to more and more a deeper sense of this kind of composure that is more comfortable, more expansive. I mean, just so that they can enjoy themselves more. But they also have to. I mean, there's still the process of the integration into. Well, you know, I that's why I use these things so that they can walk and sit, and they just have a sense that their ability to be in the world is just more comfortable. Yeah. I don't know if that's a very good answer, but that's where how I'm going to answer it right now. Yeah. Go ahead.
I just had a. Oh.
Is
In terms, is there an optimal ergonomic relationship between your chair height, you, and that the table, or
no,
is it?
Because there's no table
individual?
that fits me, and there's no chair that fits me.
Because I really struggle with that kind of like.
Yeah, that's that.
I mean.
So how are you gonna find that for yourself?
Well, I've been experimenting.
And what are the criteria you're going to use to determine when you're comfortable?
Okay.
Yeah.
It's me. Oh, they're there. Okay, so checking those. They're Chinese sauce. Like, why isn't it done more in standing like that? I mean, I know we've got all this use of the pelvis and sitting, but in standing too, we can like.
Yeah, every principle that we're playing with here, you could do in standing, or you could do these lessons kneeling. Zora and I see him oftentimes working kneeling, not sitting. So, yeah, and lots of people prefer to kneel. They can get much closer to the person they're working with. There's no problem with kneeling and being here and having the weight here. With the table, in sitting, it's very difficult to get close enough to lift this person's head or to lift their legs. So oftentimes kneeling is preferred.
Very pervasive, isn't it?
It's yeah. I think what's it called? Pooja? Is that what it's called? It's chanting?
Well, pooja is a whole ceremony, which
Huh?
includes chanting.
Okay, so these are hopefully we're still working with the principles of the movement. Even if I'm sitting here and I'm working here, do I come in here and do I fall to the inner part of my foot? Or do I support myself to the opposite and to the opposite? I know I continually have to find where the equal and opposite is that provides me the support and the evenness within myself. Yeah. I can only sort of lead you in the very beginning to how to make these explorations. Yeah. It's very, very easy to say, please give me the answer to each of these. Yeah. And I think the main thing is that you understand that within yourself a criteria for how you make the study. Yeah. I mean, I think that's what I've tried to do all week long is for you to understand that the self-organization comes because I study these principles. Yeah. And I honor the potential that I have through my skeleton to cancel gravity, and that I have to find the way to organize myself, to organize my skeleton so that I can cancel gravity, so that I have the greatest capacity to care and to be sensitive for the person I'm working with. And through that process of me doing the work with myself, the work in and of itself has its own maturational process. it continues to lead me into my own maturation. Yeah. So, this is where we start to shift in this very wavery kind of line between the structure and the well-known academic way that we ask questions and seek to have answers, or this process by which the experience is given, and then the person finds out within themselves how to find the answers for themselves. And it's this very tricky kind of line as to whether I'm going to stay here or whether I'm actually going to find myself, you know, not in the way that I was historically trained. Yeah. This is going to be quite the. There's been so many interesting experiences in my life in different rooms. I was giving a pre-training workshop at a university in Portland. I'd rented a space. And I get there, and the first thing that happens is that someone else is in the room. And so they double book the room. So I have to go to the office and get them to double book the room. Now, the people that had double booked the room, it was in the beginning of winter, the room was very cold, and they had the windows wide open. And I'm going to have a pre-training workshop for a Feldenkrais class. So then I have to get the people, then I have to close the windows. And then I get the windows closed, and what I didn't realize is it was the same weekend that there was a particular art fair, and right below the windows was a stage where they were playing music. So then I had the music. So I get the room warm, I've got the music, I'm getting everything prepared, and the people come in and the fire alarm goes off. So, you know, these things, they moved me the next day.
The assembly point is on the lawn outside. Because of the structure of the building, you will have time to grab your purse or whatever, and then move smartly to the lawn, and we will let you know when it's safe.
We don't go through the back door exits? Only the front door exits. All right.
However, if there is
Just get out. Crikey.
it will be helpful if you sign in. So
All right. Let's have one more question, and then. Yeah. I'd like to be giving really smart answers, but we are really in the realm of the answers not being. Yeah, they're elusive, aren't they? Yeah.
But obvious.
Yeah.
Well, my question's probably easy. I want just, you know, watching David Attenborough, thinking that evolution is interesting, talking about the evolution of man. They talk about adaptability,
Yeah.
our capacity to meet a new situation and change. Is that a simile? Is it the same as or very close to learning? It seems to me that when you adapt, you learn something new, and that Moshe uses the word, talks about our capacity to learn new things. Is it just a direct parallel, or do you think they're different?
Imagine how far evolution is going to go if we don't learn something new.
Yeah. So then, is the smarts just that, Moshe, when I'm not going to say adapt, I'm going to say learn?
Well, adapt. It wouldn't be Moshe would think. I don't think that he would think highly of the term adapt.
Yeah. Okay. But he preferred learning.
Well, look, Moshe gives two criteria for what health is. The first criteria that he gives is, he says, health means that you have the ability to recover from shock. So if you've had an event that was harmful to you, that you have the ability to recover. Now that, if we look at that, that's resilience. But it's also coming back to where you were. Yes?
To recover.
To recover. Now Moshe goes a step further, but he says true health is the ability to live your unavowed dreams. Which means that in this world of chaos and uncertainty, that you have the internal resources to meet this world in such a way that you flourish. That's not recovery. This is the ability with all the,
Blossom.
yes, blossom, flourish,
Mm.
to thrive, that your resources and your ability to organize your resources is stuff that you can organize yourself to meet the vagaries of life in such a way that you have.
So does that mean that adaptation might be just survival, but not flourishing? Whereas
Exactly.
learning, okay, I see. It's
Yes.
it's a greater, and it's to a much greater extent.
To a much greater
Okay,
extent.
yeah.
Yeah. And I think that Moshe really clearly thought that he developed a model by which people could learn to utilize themselves in such a way that was a higher way that gave them the opportunity to meet the world, and with composure, with intelligence, with a profound ability to use their mind in a constructive way rather than have their mind being driven by in compulsive habits.
Yeah.
And as a result of that, to be in the world. And even if we look at body mature behavior, and he says that the idea of a cure in psychoanalysis is to come to the place where you're no longer anxious and no longer insecure. Yeah. So the question is what is the demeanor of a person? What's the way you are in your face? What's the sense of composure? What's the quality that you live if you're not driven by anxiety? You're not driven by worry. You're not driven by insecurity. You're not driven by some need to perform to give yourself a sense of well-being. If you're not driven by that. He also says the greatest things that have ever happened that have been produced by man are produced as a result of neurosis. Yeah?
Yes.
That need, and I can tell you this work was developed out of
And I think
neurosis.
the adaptation would be the need for survival. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So
Yeah,
now we're
that's
getting into heavy duty. We're lifting heavy weights now.
Good.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So anything from, how was that to play with that little movement of gliding the foot and to kind of just start recognizing that if you look at the bones and you look at the structure of the foot and see that it's for you to grasp this, but it's for you to then internalize it. It's not for you to have it so that you can apply it. If you have it within yourself and you've internalized it, then you can apply it. But if my hands, I'm doing this thing and I'm in here and I've collapsed my arches and I'm in here like this and I've rolled over myself and then I'm doing this, I can tell you my self-organization is not providing the state for the person who's experiencing. And if I'm making the movement and I'm making the movement move and I'm doing this and doing that and I'm in here and I'm completely captured by the world of gravity, then I'm not living the organization and I'm not in the exploration by which I make the movement, so that if I want to make the movement, everything comes out of my hands. Yeah? All right. I'm going to demonstrate one thing. Then I want to take a moment to look at something. We'll play with what we look at for the morning. We'll come back and have a little ATM. I'd love to spend 5 days with you on lifting the head. I'll probably have to demonstrate to give you some clues, yeah, to those of you that are practitioners that are here for the week. Just to let you know, I have a ton of material on my website, and it's not me trying to sell my material, but if you want to work in groups or whatever, I have a self-organization again and again and again, which is a workshop I gave in New York, where this material is completely available to you, and these explanations, the days are much longer, so I can get in much more material during the time. But this is all on my website at insidemoves.org, and you guys can pick them up. Some of it's on Vimeo, some of it is only available on DVD. But there are resources for you you have your own recordings of this, yeah. But there are resources for you to look, and there are places where I go beyond what we're able to do here. Okay. All right. So may I have someone who? Yeah, you come. Okay. So now, just wait. Now come here just for a moment. I want you guys to all see something. In other words, so every single joint, you see, I have to find my way to be more connected. No. So can you take off your shirt just for a moment? So, yeah, no, it's okay. It's just every single joint. Every joint has within it a capacity. It has an ability to compress. It has ability to decompress or for traction. It has some measure or some availability within which the joint has a range. Now, if I'm careful here, I can find that this movement begins to connect to the next bone. And so if I'm sensitive, I can actually sense when I make the connection and I start to invite the next bone to participate. Yeah? So if I do the same thing with his wrist, I can start to play with the flexibility that he has with his wrist. And I'll reach a point of time with his wrist, yeah, that as I make these movements, I can play with his wrist will reach a point. And I can actually begin to say, when is it that he's more or less independent of what's above? And when is it that I begin to capture what's above? Yeah? So I can take this movement, and now there's still movement, Now I start to sense the ulna and the radius begin to twist. Now, did anybody go look at the elbow like we said earlier on? When we talked about the difference between the radius and the elbow and radius and the ulna, there was a point of time I said to ask you about what's the difference between how the ulna works and how the radius works? No, I also asked about radius and ulna.
That's true. Yeah. Oh, it's in my notes.
Didn't I? What was it in reference to? Yeah. Okay, so the radius will turn. Oh, it was whether you're leaning on the hands, whether or not the strongest leaning on the hands, and because when you look at the bottom of the radius, it's very broad, and so people will say you should lean on the thick part of the bone. But in fact, it's a question of where is it? Is there a relationship between the fourth carpal and the ulna? Because if we see this, the way the ulna is, as soon as I reach a particular point, then the ulna begins to move his upper arm. And so I can begin to have this sense of connection, and I can sense as I make the movement when I begin to connect to the next part of the lever arm. And see, now I can make this movement, and now you can see that this movement is relatively independent of the shoulder. And what does the shoulder do? We know that what happens with the gliding of the talus. How does the shoulder move? The shoulder is also a gliding joint in the joint capsule. So as I make this movement, as his arm begins to rotate this way in the capsule, the humeral head must be gliding the opposite direction. And now, can I be sensitive enough to start to sense when the humeral head is a part of that it's gliding in the joint? Yeah, because I want to be at that point. Because if I hit the next point, all of a sudden now I have his shoulder engaged. Yeah, and as I have his shoulder engaged, funny damn thing, don't I now have what's next? Can't I find the relationship to his clavicle? And can I find the relationship, if I do this really well, to his clavicle in such a way that I can move him backwards towards me, to step backwards, to give the movement to go forward, right? So that I have his skeleton in my hands. Yeah? And when I have his skeleton in his hands, I have the biomechanic capacity. There's nothing in his tissue that I'm dealing with. I'm listening. I can sense for myself when, if there's thickness or if there's difficulty, because that each one of those movements would become, there would be a resistance to them, wouldn't there? Yeah. Now, we don't have time to play with all that. You could You could. It's dancing. It's yoga. It's everything, isn't it? But we're going to play with it in a slightly different way for our purpose from what we've been doing. Okay? So please come and lie on your back. No, your feet here, please. Yeah, your feet here. Yeah, no trouble. And come towards me, because you know I'm lazy. Estoy muy flojo. Sí, como no, como siempre. May I have that pink roller over there, please? Just chuck it in here, it'll be fine. All right, please lift your knees. There we go. There we go. Okay. So we've started yesterday and you started to feel the metatarsal heads, and each one of these movements is important to us, just this little sense of the metatarsal heads. You can start to find these two bones that begin to relate to the heel, so you can hold the heel and the outer part of the foot in your hand. You can begin to imagine finding the cuboid. There's all kinds of things you can begin to find. But let's just take it now for the moment. We had a little movement of gliding the talus, yeah? And did everybody stand up after that and find that their foot was more like their real foot, the way that they would most like to have the ground? Yeah? No? Okay, so now we've done all that. We're going to make this really nice connection with ourselves again. And I'm going to think that I'm going to pass through this joint to the next joint. Because I can be here and have the sense that every movement I make is on this side from his foot and not being connected to his lower leg. And then I can begin to go, okay, so now I have the lower leg, the foot connected. What do I have to do with the connection to go through the joint and begin to have the connection through the lower leg? And what sensitivity? Now, what's the potential that he has? What are all the potential movements that his lower leg has under his knee? They can go up and down. Now, we know for sure that the knee is more or less a hinge joint, isn't it? Right? So there's some movements we really don't want to have to make. And if someone makes those, everybody goes, ooh, right? So I know that I can make this movement. I can go here, I can start to connect. And as I start to connect, the lower leg has the ability, if I take my attention up and through to the point that I'm resting at the tibial plateau, then if I make this movement on the tibial plateau, you can again see that I'm making this movement, and his lower leg is moving under the tibial plateau, but I haven't captured the upper leg yet. So now what do I have to do to go through the upper leg? Now, there will be a little rotational and a little bit of flexion and extension, right? It's not, your physical therapist or your orthopedic doctor is going to make a little bit of a movement down and up to see whether or not your posterior and anterior cruciate ligaments are intact. Yeah, because it really does something different if they're not. Okay, so I have the ability to make a little bit of a connection, and then I have the ability to sink. It's like I'm gliding from the lower leg into the upper leg, and then I'm going to capture the upper leg. So I have to find out, how will I make the connection? I have to move my hands, I have to move myself so that I connect, and so that when I make the movement, now I have his whole leg in his hand. Yeah? And when I have this connection with his whole leg in his hand, and I can take it and I can compress, I can withdraw, I can connect in such a way that I roll him inward, I can connect in such a way I can roll him outward, I shift my attention up into the femoral head. And then I shift into the place where I can rotate his femoral head and have not be connected. I need to know how much play is available within his joint, and then connect, and then I start to have the sense that I'm moving into his torso. Now, did you see what his breath just did? As soon as that made that connection, his diaphragm just did that. And so I'm inviting you to play with that sense of connection until you sense that his diaphragm or her diaphragm lifts. Okay? So it's almost you take the time, step by step by step, flowing through, making the connection. And when this connection really comes intact, now you can see that this connection is no more than the weight of my breath. Each one of these joint spaces is minimal, isn't it? But we're looking for him to neurologically sense that one after the other, that he's connected. And then when I make that connection, that's like him standing on his leg. I can hold his heel to do that. I can hold through his foot to do that. There. Now I've supported it. As he went in, I gave him more ground. And as I recede with him, I join into the movement, I recede with him, and he has this picture, it looks like the tide on. He's wearing exactly the right t-shirt for the day. Yeah? So that we're in this, and we're inviting him to find this kind of tidal resting place. Okay? This is to develop a highly refined sense of sensitivity, and that comes from how I'm organized with myself. This will not be found with just your hands. Yeah. This is you being so connected to each element and flowing into and capturing and sensing how the next element captures, and then being on this side of the joint, then going through and sensing into the joint, capture. So that when now I make the movement, there's enough friction, there's enough connection that I can capture and make the smallest movement. Then I flow through, and then I'm in the hip joint, and I have the sense that I'm there with the on this side of the hip joint. And then I flow in and make the connection in such a way that he begins to have the sense that when I'm there and making that connection, whether he wants it or not, and for many people, it'll be the first breath they've taken in their life. First breath that they take without anxiety. I mean this. Yeah, you provide a particular thing. Now, this sense of this connection, when that connection takes place, there's a particular neurological response that there's no way in the world that if I'm in this connection with him, so that when we're in this place, there's no way in the world that he has the sense that he would want to look down. Yeah, he's getting the whole notion of to flex is inhibited, so the extensors are engaged. It's a neck reflex, isn't it? So yeah, I ask you because there is a reflex that relates to the lifting of the head and the opening of the diaphragm. And if the support is given, that reflex brings a person into a place. So now let's see what happens when he come and stand up for a moment. Huh? Yeah, just take a moment and come and stand up, because I want to show something to everybody so that you'll understand again something. Now, please step out just a little bit. That's it. Now, please place your left foot a little bit forward of your right. That's it. And start to come onto your left foot. And when you have the sense, wait, slowly. When you have the sense that your foot is there supporting you, that's it. You see, as he's making the movement, his head is starting to lift up and through as he's making it. Now, stay right there on your foot like that. Your right foot just there for the support. Now, please turn your head and sense the quality of the movement of your head as you turn it on the axis. Turn it above on the axis. Yeah. The quality, the ease, the range of motion, the sense of internal stability, And you notice that his eyes, does he look down? Does he keep with his head and chin up? Where's his horizon? Yes? Okay, come back again. And then put that foot back. And then place your left foot forward. Excuse me, your right foot forward. Yeah. Now I know that you've had trouble with this, but go ahead. Don't do it well. Just come on so we can watch. Now watch. Right there. Did he sink? Now watch. Really stay on there. Stay on there. Just quit getting better. Look now where the attitude of his eyes is. Now watch as he makes the movement to turn his head, because he knows that he can't. No, you can't force it. Stop it. You get to be, right? Because the whole damn thing falls apart a little bit. Yeah? There's something that's inhibited. His extensors are inhibited at this moment. Yeah? So there's no way in the world that internally he can experience himself as being secure, because he can't internally trust that he's safe in the world. Yeah? This is a very important point for us, that when we're dealing with the question of internal security, yeah, if the world does not provide me with the support, my system must neurologically do what it can to maintain my position. Now watch when he steps on his other foot. Already, there it is, already. Yes? Look at this, okay? Exactly. All right, this is a distinct change, okay? So you help a person for a few moments with your partner. Let's not take all morning with this, okay? 10, 15 minutes to just make the connection to what you can, and then you have the person stand and notice the difference of how they stand on the foot that you've just worked with. They'll sense a difference that creates a different neurology, especially when you have the point where you just simply merge with them until this global breath begins to appear. You cannot get there with force. You cannot, it's not positional. This is not something that you can force to happen. This is something that emerges in their system when you've provided the opportunity for that. And please be kind with yourself if it doesn't happen for a few months or a few weeks in your practice. This is, again, to just, we must give you a long-range view of the potential, don't we? This comes out of your organization. That very way of being in my hands and the way I'm in my pelvis gives me the sensitivity to be able to listen to this possibility. Go play.